Yeah, good morning everyone. Today's online class, the topic is going to be the non-excretory functions of kidney. So, what are the functions of kidney? General function is to formation of urine, that means the filtration of plasma and excretion of the waste materials. Those, if they will remain in the body, they will cause harm to our body. So, they are the excretory materials and they must be removed from the body. So, that is the excretory function. That means the main function is the excretion. But the kidney also having some other functions which are not directly related to the excretion or not limited only to the excretion, rather it will serve more progressive functions. What are the functions? Some of the functions are that uh, it can maintain the osmotic concentration of the body, or in a simple way, simple term, if I can say, it can maintain the water balance of the body. Second, the system is that it can maintain the blood pressure up to a certain limit. So it can control the blood pressure. The kidney is having some role that can control the blood pressure. The system we know, some informations we have, that is the JG apparatus is involved there. Plus there is renin and angiotensin system. This system works. They are somehow related with the kidney along with the JG cells. What is somehow, that I will describe in detail. So by this way, this renin angiotensin system can maintain the normal arterial blood pressure of our body. This is another function which is not related to the excretion, but kidney is having a major role. Next function is the role in erythropoiesis. Erythropoiesis means synthesis of erythrocytes. From where? Obviously from the bone marrows. So the kidneys is having another role which stimulates the synthesis of erythrocytes from the bone marrows. Other function it is also having, that it can maintain the acid base balance of our body. Kidneys are capable enough to maintain the normal acid base balance of our body. So these four functions I will try to describe today, and whatever possible I'll try to complete. So first function we have is the water balance. So the question is how the kidneys can maintain the water balance. Uh, so what is water balance? What does it mean? Actually, two terms are there. We'll go through these two terms. One is that osmolarity. If I spell out it, osmolarity, OSMOLARITY, osmolarity. Another one is osmolality, LITY. Both are same. So osmolarity almost same. Osmolarity, RITY, is that the concentration of a solution expressed as the total number of solute particles per liter. I repeat, the concentration of a solution expressed as the total number of solute particles per liter, and osmolality, LITY, is the total number of solute particles per kg. That is the difference. One expressed in the total number of solute particles per liter, another one will express solute particle in per kg. That is the difference. So whenever the osmo concentration of the body fluid falls, the condition is that this will be expressed in a diagrammatic or in a flowchart view. The consequences are that whenever the concentration of body fluid falls, how the concentration of body fluid will fall? If the solvent will increase in number, in quantity. So generally, who is the solvent of our all the body fluids, all the ions and everything, whatever are present in our cell? Water. So water is the solvent. So as the solvent concentration increases, or as the solvent quantity increases, the osmo concentration of our body fluid falls. Is it not? If the water content, water amount will increase in the cell, in the body or in the tissue fluid, the osmo concentration of the body fluid falls. At that condition, the kidney excrete hypotonic urine. That means the volume of urine produced for that person will increase. So the kidneys will excrete hypotonic urine that can eliminate the excess amount of water which is present in the body fluids, and thereby it can increases the osmo concentration by decreasing the or by excreting the more amount of solutes, the more amount of solvents. On the contrary, that is the opposite condition is that whenever the osmo concentration of the body fluid rises, how the osmo concentration of body fluid rises, either the solutes will increase or the solvent will decreases. So generally it is considered that when the, in case of our body, human body, when the we are taking less amount of water or we are having less amount of water in our body, that causes the increase in the body fluid concentration. At that condition, the kidneys excrete hypertonic urine, that is concentrated urine. The kidney can excrete concentrated urine and thereby it will retain as much as water in the body fluids, and it will allow very less or very negligible amount of water to being excreted along with the urine, so that the concentration of body fluid will remain constant or within a normal limit. Now, the what is the pathway? How it will be regulated, and where is the role of kidney? The osmoreceptor ADH feedback control system is operated in our body. What is the system? The osmoreceptor ADH feedback control system, which maintains the water balance of our body. So this is the osmoreceptor ADH feedback control system. How it will work? First, try to understand what are the things, what are these structures. See, some osmoreceptors are present in the hypothalamus. In our brain, hypothalamus region, osmoreceptors are present. Osmoreceptor means these are the receptors which can sense any kind of change in the osmotic concentration of our body fluids. Osmotic concentration means whether it is concentrated, whether it is diluted, these things it can identify. Okay. Uh, then what is written? I mean, the drawing is that this is the pituitary gland, and from the posterior pituitary. So as we know that hypothalamus being a master gland, it is having some kind of control on the pituitary gland, and from the posterior side of pituitary, one hormone which is known as antidiuretic hormone. That hormone can release and it will act on the nephrons to control the whether it will excrete a concentrated urine or whether it will excrete a dilute urine. So that is the thing. Now, if I consider in detail, the conditions are that an increase in the osmolality, that is when there is excess amount of sodium and other kind of ions are present in the body. Okay, that means less amount of water is present in the body. This causes excitation. I repeat, this causes excitation of the osmoreceptors which are present in the hypothalamus. I am repeating again. When there is an increase in the osmolality, that means when there is excess concentration of sodium and other types of ions in our body and less amount of water in our body, this condition excites the osmoreceptors which are present in the hypothalamus. Or simple way, when there is the water deprivation, less amount of water. Less amount of water means the plasma osmolality is high concentration of plasma osmolality that stimulates the osmoreceptor present in the hypothalamus. Now these osmoreceptors, when they are excited, they in turn stimulates the another nuclei known as supraoptic nuclei, which causes the posterior pituitary to release the ADH. So the pathway is that osmoreceptors stimulates the supraoptic nuclei. This nuclei stimulates the posterior pituitary, and from the posterior pituitary one hormone, antidiuretic hormone or ADH, is released. Now what is the function of ADH? This ADH increases the permeability of the distal tubules and the cortical collecting ducts. That means this ADH hormone acts on the DCT and the collecting ducts. They increases the permeability of DCT and the collecting ducts to the water. They increases the permeability of these two to the water. So what does it mean? It causes increased conservation of water by the kidneys. How it will conserving the water? Actually, the reabsorption of water will increase. More amount of water is now being reabsorbed by the distal convoluted tubule and the collecting duct because of presence of ADH, which increases the permeability of this DCT and the collecting duct to its highest level. In normal condition, whatever amount of water is being reabsorbed, now maximum amount of water is being reabsorbed because of increase of the permeability of distal convoluted tubule and the collecting duct. Why? Because of uh, and then next is that the ADH also triggers the thrust mechanism and increases the water intake. So second thing is that one action of ADH is that it increases the renal water retention. That is, more amount of water is being reabsorbed, more amount of water is being retained in the body, and less amount of water is excreted to the urine. So that is the antidiuresis. That mechanism is antidiuresis. What is antidiuresis? Retaining of more amount of water and excretion of very less amount of water through the urine. That mechanism is antidiuresis. Therefore, that hormone is also known as antidiuretic hormone. Okay, diuresis is the, see, actually diuresis is a certain kind of drug which is being used. When it is used in the body, more amount of water is being produced by the person. Antidiuresis means retaining of water in the body. So that is the hormone. So one function of ADH is to retain more amount of water by increasing the permeability of the DCT and the collecting duct. So increases the water reabsorption. Another action of ADH is the increase in thirst and the water intake. That ADH will increase the thirst mechanism of that person. So you will getting more thirsty, and thereby you will take more amount of water in the body. So the sum total is that when there is the uh, the osmolarity of the body increases, that is, amount of sodium and other ion increases in the body and the water is less. The osmoreceptors in the hypothalamus, they are triggered, that is excited, that causes the stimulate the posterior pituitary, which releases ADH in the blood. Okay, now by flowing through the blood, it will reach to the kidney and it will act on the distal convoluted tubule and collecting duct. It increases both of their permeability to water. So highest amount of water is now being reabsorbed, retained in the body, and very less amount of urine is excreted. That means that urine is now hypertonic urine, highest concentrated urine. Very less will be in the amount. That is the one action of ADH. Another action is that it will increases the thirst mechanism. So the person will become feel more thirsty. So he or she need to take more amount of water. So one way ADH is retaining more amount of water in the body and excreting very less amount through the urine. Another way it will making you thirsty, so that you are taking more amount of water or other liquids. So thereby more amount of water or required amount of water, required amount of liquid is now being stored in your body, and the osmo concentration will become or gradually becoming normal. That is the mechanism. So that's how the kidneys can maintain the water balance. Okay, not only the along the kidney can do it, but there are some other mechanism, there are some other hormones, sometimes some other organs may be involved, but involvement of kidney is the major one. So that is the one mechanism which is considered as the function of kidneys, very important function of kidney, but not the excretion, other type of function. That is the water balance. Second one is that maintaining the blood pressure, which is more prominently known as the renin angiotensin system, not this one. Yeah, that is the renin angiotensin system. So if you can remember the from our last classes, juxtaglomerular apparatus. What is juxtaglomerular apparatus? The triangular shaped structure, almost triangular shaped structure, which is being formed by the afferent arterioles, efferent arterioles, and a part of distal convoluted tubule, that is having different kinds of layers, different kinds of cells. Some cells are releasing the renin. If you can remember, some of their cells, specific cells are there which are capable of releasing the renin, and angiotensin is present in the blood plasma as a plasma protein. So these two can act together and they will activate the renin angiotensin system. The consequence is that when the arterial pressure falls, as we know that we are having a more or less constant, if the person is healthy normal adult person having no kind of major illness, the normal blood pressure of the person is always more or less around the normal range. But if the arterial pressure falls from the normal range, the uh, macula densa, the JG cells which are present in the macula densa of JG apparatus, this JG cell of macula densa releases the one enzyme which is known as renin. That renin enzyme acts on the angiotensinogen to release angiotensin 1 and then angiotensin 2, and thereby they can control the blood pressure. The total mechanism is this one. When there is decrease in the arterial pressure, it can be sensed by the macula densa cells. The JG cells of this macula densa, then excited, they will release the enzyme renin. This renin acts enzymatically on angiotensinogen. What is angiotensinogen? Angiotensinogen is a plasma protein which is the substrate for the renin. See, the renin is an enzyme. So if enzyme is present, a substrate should be there. And enzyme plus substrate, enzyme substrate complex, what is the result? Result will be a product is there, is not it? So the renin is the enzyme, its substrate is an angiotensinogen. This angiotensinogen, which is a plasma protein in nature, if you can remember what are the plasma proteins, the proteins, the globular large molecular size proteins which are present in our plasma, which are found in the plasma. This is the plasma protein. So angiotensinogen, which is a substrate of renin, renin can act on it and it will produce angiotensin 1. From this angiotensin 1, it can be converted into angiotensin 2 by a converting enzyme known as ACE, capital A, capital C, capital E, or called as angiotensin converting enzyme, which is generally present in the lung, and this can convert angiotensin 1 to angiotensin 2. Now what is its action? Now okay, so some few information is that angiotensin 1 is a 10 amino acid peptide. This angiotensin 1 is a 10 amino acid peptide, and within a few seconds after the formation of angiotensin 1, two additional amino acids are split from the angiotensin 1 to form the angiotensin 2. So the sum total is that angiotensin 1 is a 10 amino acid peptide. Angiotensin 1 is a 10 amino acid peptide, and then within a few seconds after the formation of angiotensin 1, two amino acids are being split from that 10 peptide, and now it will become 8 peptide, and that is known as the angiotensin 2, and this is mediated by the another enzyme which is present in the lung known as angiotensin converting enzyme. Now this conversion occurs almost entirely in the lungs. Angiotensin 2 persists in the body only. Another consequence is that the angiotensin 2 which is just formed, that angiotensin 2 persists in the body only for 1 to 2 minutes because it is rapidly inactivated by multiple blood and the tissue enzymes called the angiotensinase. That is, after the angiotensin 2 is being formed, within 1 or 2 minutes, that angiotensin 2 is inactivated by another enzyme which is present in the blood known as angiotensinase. That is the inactivation of the angiotensin 2 within 1 or 2 minutes. But what is its function? What does it will do within this 1 or 2 minutes? The function is that one function of angiotensin 2 is renal retention of salt and water. What is that? Renal retention of salt and water. That means it will reabsorb, like almost like the ADH, it will reabsorb more amount of water and more amount of salt in the body. So thereby it will decreases the excess excretion of salt and water through the urine. So that is the one function of angiotensin 2 is the retention or reabsorption of more amount of salt and water. It is having another function. Another function is the vasoconstriction. So if it will retain more amount of salt and water, what is the consequence? If more amount of salt and water is retained, that increases your blood pressure. So initial condition is that, just look at the first line of this flowchart, decreased arterial pressure. Now because of this angiotensin 2 which causes the reabsorption of more salt and water, this increases the arterial pressure to normal. Another one is that angiotensin 2 causes the vasoconstriction. So constriction of the vessel means the blood pressure increases slightly up to how? Up to the normal limit. So that is the total renin angiotensin system. The angiotensin 2 has two principal effects that can elevate the arterial pressure. The first is the vasoconstriction, or you can consider first as the renal retention. Anyone, which one is the first or second, both are important. So we can consider as the vasoconstriction which occurs in the arterioles. The vasoconstriction occurs in the arterioles and increases the total peripheral resistance, thereby raising the arterial pressure. Another function of angiotensin 2 is that it acts on the adrenal cortex to release the aldosterone. Another hormone is the aldosterone. So angiotensin 2 acts on the adrenal cortex which releases the aldosterone. Aldosterone is the principal sodium retaining steroid hormone. It is the steroid hormone and its action is to reabsorb more amount of sodium. So because of the angiotensin 2 which acts on the adrenal cortex, aldosterone is released. Now aldosterone causes the reabsorption of more amount of sodium from the blood and excretion of less amount of sodium to decrease the excretion of both salt and water. Both of this action causes the increase of the extracellular fluid volume and thereby increases the arterial pressure. Okay, so retaining of more amount of sodium in the blood means increasing the blood pressure. So this may be the reason that Sometimes doctors are, I mean, in case of most of the hypertensive patients, they are suggesting that try not to take sodium salts uh, with your food, or decrease your sodium content with the food. This may be the reason, because retaining of more amount of sodium ions increases the extracellular fluid volume, which increases the arterial pressure. So that is the renin-angiotensin system. Okay, so these two I have discussed today. Next, other two topics will be for the next class. So regarding blood volume, is that the kidneys can regulate the blood volume by adjusting the amount of water and the sodium loss. That means if your blood volume is excess, then the mechanism is that it can reabsorb less amount and excrete more amount of water and the sodium ions. On the contrary, that is on the other side, if your blood volume is less, blood is highly concentrated, then the mechanism causes reabsorption of excess amount of water and sodium that will retain in the blood and maintain the blood volume. So three steps are there. One step is that aldosterone angiotensin 2 acts on the all the tubules and increases more sodium retention. The aldosterone also stimulates the sodium transport and reabsorption of sodium transport into the interstitium. ADH also causes or increases the water permeability in the late distal and collecting tubule, and thereby this also causes the retention of or reabsorption of more amount of water, and thereby the sum total of all these mechanism is reducing less urine content and preserving more amount of water. So thereby it maintains the blood volume. Uh, Next mechanism we have the erythropoiesis. What is erythropoiesis? This is nothing but the formation of erythrocytes. From where all the blood cells or erythrocytes are formed? That is bone marrow. So there is some mechanism which can trigger the bone marrow, and that's how the kidney is regulated with the erythropoiesis mechanism, and it can control. So just let us discuss. The condition is that, physiological condition is that, see, when there is decrease in the tissue oxygenation, this flowchart is starting from the bottom line. This flowchart is starting from the bottom line. Just try to find out the tissue oxygenation. Okay, so when there is decrease in the tissue oxygenation, decrease in the tissue oxygenation means when there is less, the tissues are getting less amount of oxygen, or there may be hypoxia, hypoxic condition is there, the environmental oxygen is less. All these conditions triggers the erythropoietin. That erythropoietin is released from the kidney. This erythropoietin flowing through the blood, it will reach inside the bone, that is the bone marrow, where the hematopoietic stem cell is there. So this erythropoietin triggers or stimulates the hematopoietic stem cell to begin the process of erythropoiesis. So that's how at the end we are getting more number of erythrocytes or the red blood cells. So the condition is that when there is decrease in the tissue oxygenation, look at the conditions. What are the factors which decreases the tissue oxygenation? One factor is your blood volume may be low. If you have the low blood volume, that means the blood cells are also low. So the less amount of blood is being circulated throughout the body, so it will carry the less amount of oxygen. Second condition is the anemia. So anemia is actually defined as either the your RBC count is low, or the RBC count is perfect, okay, but the concentration of hemoglobin inside all the RBCs are less. In either condition is known as the anemia. So either your RBC count is low, or your hemoglobin concentration inside all the RBCs are low. Both the conditions are termed as anemia. If you are having this condition, your tissues will get less amount of oxygen. Whatever oxygen they generally require, they are getting less. Third condition is the low hemoglobin. If you are having the low hemoglobin concentration, so less hemoglobin can carry less amount of oxygen, so your tissues are getting less oxygen. Fourth is the poor blood flow. We can assume that everything is normal, but some of the organs or some specific organs is getting less blood supply. So that also results less tissue oxygenation. Final one is the pulmonary disease. Everything is normal, but you are having some kind of lung diseases, pulmonary diseases, where which can affect the gaseous exchange between the blood and the environment. That's why very less amount of oxygens are being entered into blood, and therefore your blood is not capable enough to giving the proper amount of oxygen to the tissues. So all these are conditions that results in the less tissue oxygenation. If your tissues are getting, try to understand the logic. If your tissues are getting less oxygen, they will require more oxygen. So how you can give them oxygen? One method is that if you can increase your breathing rate, but breathing rate is not always sufficient. That is because you are increasing, you are taking more amount of oxygen, you are releasing more amount of carbon dioxide. That is okay. But who will carry the oxygen throughout all the tissues? Blood cells, obviously the RBCs. So somehow you have to increase the count of RBCs, because RBCs are the carrier which actually carries the oxygen from the lung to all the tissue cells. You can increase your breathing rate, okay, that's fine, but increase the breathing rate is not fulfill your condition. That if you can increase your breathing rate, all these oxygens are not entering to the tissues. So you have to increase the uh, the person who is actually carrying the oxygen to the tissues. Who is the person? The person is actually the RBCs. So you can increase the red blood cell count. So at that condition, the kidneys will release erythropoietin factor. That erythropoietin factor act on the hematopoietic stem cell of our bone marrows. Thereby, it triggers the erythropoietin process. This is not a single one. 4, 5, or 6 steps are involved. At the end, we are getting the fully matured red blood cells, which are full of hemoglobin, and they now able to carry more amount of oxygen. Now the tissue oxygenation or the hypoxic condition is relieved, as we are having more number of RBCs. So now our tissues are getting the more oxygen. The total thing, if I sum up, the regulation process is like this one. When there is the hypoxia or your tissues are getting less oxygen, reason may be whatever, but the final consequence is that my tissues are getting less amount of oxygen. Whatever oxygen they want, they are getting less. That is the hypoxia. So the CRF, corticotrophin releasing factor, will be the hypothalamus can be sense that hypoxia, and it will release the CRF, corticotrophin releasing factor. This CRF will act on the pituitary gland, which is the master gland. This pituitary will release ACTH hormone, adrenocorticotrophic hormone, that will act on the adrenal gland, specifically in the adrenal cortex. From that adrenal cortex, androgen hormone will be released. That androgen hormone is act on the kidney. That kidney will releasing the renal erythropoietic factor. That renal erythropoietic factor act on the plasma protein. That from that it produces the erythropoietin. Now this erythropoietin will circulate throughout the blood. It will enter the bone marrow, and it will stimulate the bone marrow to produce the erythropoiesis, and thereby more number of RBCs are formed. At the end, now all the RBCs can carry the oxygen, and tissues are getting the proper amount of oxygen now. So that is the function of kidney or role of kidney in erythropoiesis. I think last we have, that is the maintaining the acid base balance. How kidneys can maintain the acid base balance? See, the kidneys can maintain the acid base balance of our body by ammonia secretion, by base conservation from bicarbonates, or by reabsorbing ions, mainly the sodium ion, as we already know. I repeat the line. The kidneys can maintain the acid base balance of our body, number 1 by ammonia secretion, number 2 by base conservation from bicarbonates, number 3 by reabsorbing some ions, mainly sodium ions, from the urine. So first one is the base conservation by bicarbonate ion. See the mechanism. Just look at this graphical representation. Try to understand what is this. One side is the bloodstream, that is the blood is flowing outside the tubules, outside the renal tubules. Following the that vasa recta. So along the vasa recta, the blood is flowing through the bloodstream. Okay. So after that, what is there? After that, there is the renal tubules. Now the renal tubules are these are not the some mechanical structures. These are the life structures. That means these are made up of some cells. The renal tubules are made up of cells. Yes, the renal tubules are made up of cells. So this is the proximal tubular cells. Look at the that markings. Bloodstream, inside that proximal tubular cells. These are the cells which are forming the wall of the tubules. Okay. So if that is the cell, inside that one, what is that? That is the lumen of the tubule. Lumen means this is the inside of the tubule. The lumen through which the urine is flowing or the fluid is flowing, that lumen is circulated by the wall of tubule. That wall is forming by the cells which is known as the proximal tubular cells. Outside that, there is the blood stream. Blood is flowing through the vasa recta or some other tissues, other vessels. That is the condition. Now, the base conservation from bicarbonates, HCO3 minus bicarbonate ions. So from where these bicarbonate ions are preserved? These bicarbonate ions are preserved from the urine. So what is the route through which the urine is flowing? The urine is actually flowing inside the tubules. That is the lumen of the tube. Is not it? The lumen, through the lumen of the tubule, the urine or glomerular filter, whatever you want to say, you can say that fluid is flowing. From that, the bicarbonate ions are first carried through the tubular cells, and from that tubular cells it will be carried through the blood. Now that bicarbonate ions are now coming to the blood. Mechanism is that just I am reading. The kidneys participate in the regulation of the pH by regulating the concentration of bicarbonate in the plasma. The secretion of H plus begins in the tubular epithelial cells. Now look at the mechanism, the reactions. The secretion of H plus begins in the tubular epithelial cells, where inside the tubular epithelial cells, look out the cells, not the lumen, cells. As the CO2 reacts with the water. So CO2 plus H2O with the help of an enzyme, carbonic anhydrase, it is forming the H2CO3. In presence of the carbonic anhydrase, that same enzyme, the H2CO3 dissociates into H plus and the bicarbonate ions. H2CO3, that is the carbonic acid, which is being formed from the water and the CO2, where inside the tubular cells. Now because of presence of the same enzyme Ca, that is carbonic anhydrase, this H2CO3 or the carbonic acid is now dissociated into H plus and the bicarbonate ions, and this H plus is then secreted into the tubular lumen. See that H plus is then secreted into the urine, that is the tubular lumen. In the proximal tubule, H plus secretion is primarily coupled to the positive movement of sodium ions from the tubular lumen to the epithelial cells. See, in one way, the H plus ion is transported from the tubular cells to the lumen, that is to the urine. Another way, the sodium ions can be transported from the tubular lumen to inside the proximal tubular cells. There, just look at this one. H plus ion is transported from the tubular cell to the lumen, and Na plus is transported from the lumen to inside the tubular cell, and that Na plus along with the HCO3 minus is now transported into the blood. See, into the bloodstream. Okay, so that is the base conservation in the form of bicarbonate ions. Second, another mechanism is the base conservation by the ammonia secretion. How the ammonia secretion is occurs, just you can look out the figure. Same thing, blood stream is there, tubular cells are there, and the lumen of the tubule. Lumen means the inside portion of the tubule through which our urine is flowing, passing. So ammonia is synthesized by the epithelial cell of the proximal convoluted tubule and the distal tubules, and this ammonia is secreted into the tubular lumen. Okay, I repeat, ammonia is synthesized in the epithelial cell, inside the epithelial cell of the proximal and the distal tubules, and this ammonia is secreted into the lumen of these tubules. Uh, Approximately 60% of the ammonia synthesized in this cell is derived from mainly glutamine amino acid, and rest 40% is derived from the another two amino acids, that is glycine and the alanine. And so that is the source from which the ammonia is secreted. See, you can correlate, no? See, where the NH3 is written, this NH3 is actually synthesized 60% from glutamine and 40% from glycine and alanine. Where? Inside the PCT and the DCT cells. So this ammonia is now transported from there to lumen. Okay, look at the NH3 from where it is transported. Now this secreted ammonia immediately reacts with previously secreted H plus to form the NH4. So it will react with the H plus and it will forming the NH4. Now NH4 is excreted with the urine. Now it should be noted that formation of NH3 from the glutamine in the epithelial cell is a pH dependent phenomenon which increases the acidosis and decreases the alkalosis. So thereby this ammonia will react with the H plus ion and both of these will be secreted along with the urine. So that is the mechanism how the ammonia secretion is maintaining the acid base balance. Okay, so thank you for that's all for today's class. Now you can ask your questions.